Hello and welcome to the next guest of our short interview series for Sensory Sound, Rebecca Holman. I was wondering, Becca, if you could start off by telling the listeners a little about yourself and where your musical journey began.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. So I was actually brought up in a musical family. Both my parents are musicians, so it was always part of my life from when I was very young. And I sort of just fell in love with music, and they never ever forced me to do music. They never said you had to. But yeah, and I started learning the French horn when I was 10, and I loved it. And then I decided to go to music college. So I went to Royal Birmingham Conservatoire and graduated in 2018. And then I went on to the University of Roehampton and did the postgraduate certificate in Sounds of Intent, which is sort of music and special needs. And now I'm here as a freelance musician and loving life with music.
Lovely. Thanks for giving us a bit of background on yourself. I know as well that you have a specific interest in community music and specifically in special educational needs music making, as you just mentioned, with your degree at the University of Roehampton. I was wondering if you could tell us a little about your experience so far as a community musician.
Yeah, so my interest sort of started off when I was at Conservatoire. I volunteered at Music Melody Birmingham, and it sort of opened up a whole nother world of music making that I wasn't really aware of before. So then when I was studying, I knew that sort of community music and special needs music was something I wanted to get more involved in. So when I graduated, I did a year as a graduate music assistant. And then after that, I started being an intern with the charity Soundabout. And throughout my year as an intern, I got to experience lots of different music making sessions. So I went and shadowed practitioners in schools, in community settings, inclusive choirs, multi-sensory festivals, which was really, really interesting to find out about. And yeah, it just made me want to do it even more. And also the postgraduate certificate I did, that also helped sort of my knowledge and sort of merged it all together. So that was great. And then after my internship, I became a practitioner with Soundabout. And then the lockdown happened and the pandemic happened. So all of our delivery moved online. So I spent a lot of time doing Facebook Lives, YouTube live sessions, family one-to-one sessions on Zoom, group sessions on Zoom, and also since everything's opened up again, I've been in schools doing one-to-one or small group sessions in schools with SEN pupils and inclusive choirs and sort of community groups and things. Yeah, and I just love all the different varieties of things you can do and the impact it's having on people.
And I was wondering, like, through all your work so far, what are some of the benefits you've seen of music making with students with additional needs?
There is a lot of benefits, I think. Mostly, so a lot of my work at the moment is people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. So they might be non-verbal, they'll most likely be in a wheelchair. So sort of giving them a voice through sound and through music. And I think, I know the question touched on this later, but it's about music isn't just sort of a piece of classical music. It's about sounds, and someone might be tapping the drum really, really quietly with their finger, but that is their way of communicating, their way of being part of something. And I think that's really special. Especially with group music as well, sort of that belonging, the acceptance of being a sort of community of people, being accepted within that group. And also communication, I think. So within a session, it might be that someone makes a sound and other people copy their sound, and that's their way of communicating. And I think that's really, really beneficial to many people.
Yeah, I think we can both agree there's just like so many benefits of this type of music that we can bring to the community. And I mean, how important do you think it is that there's some sort of music making that happens in a child or young person's life, and why do you think it is so important?
I guess I just think there's so many things. I guess it goes down to that idea of communication again. And whether it's music, whether it's sort of listening to a piece of music, or whether it's making music within the people you're with, you can use music as communication for making a choice of things. So they might only be able to make a couple of vocal sounds, or they might only be able to move a shaker or something. But you could use those little small aspects that they can make and make that into something else. So you might say that their voice goes up for yes, or goes down for no, or something like that. I think that's important. And I think also the emotions that we feel through music as well. I think that's really important, because everyone feels emotions, whatever your ability may be. We all feel emotions, and we all know that music can evoke those emotions and make them stand out. So yes, I think music is also important to listen to and to feel those emotions through music.
Definitely. Yeah, I really agree with all of that. In your opinion, do you think that there's enough music outreach work aimed at children and young adults with additional needs?
I don't think there can ever be too much, to be honest. I think so the straight answer is no. There's not enough. I think that part of it is funding, part of it is financial, especially for schools and colleges and community centres, that it's another thing to fund that some people may not feel is essential, whereas sort of other things may be more important than music in their opinion. Yes, the funding, and particularly after the pandemic, everyone's always obviously very sort of financially struggling. But I think actually to get the message out that music is so important is vital. I think particularly also when not just within schools, but when they leave school or college as well, they're sort of in that environment in school where they're learning and they're giving all these opportunities, and then they leave and there's hardly anything for adults with special needs once they leave college, so sort of that young adult age. Yes, if there can be more for that, that'd be brilliant. And some of the work I've been doing is aimed at that age group. And speaking to families, they've also agreed there's hardly anything going on once they leave school or college.
Yeah, I guess that's why like charities like Soundabout are so important for providing like an online resource as well.
Yeah, because they're all there still, so people can go back and look at them whenever and use them whenever and replay. And I know that some families replay the same video over and over and over again, which is fantastic. Like, they obviously love it, so it's good.
Yeah, no, it's great that it can continue past school and past college and past those sort of like educational settings. And I guess in that sort of topic, in your experience, what are some of the factors that you have seen that might put parents and carers off completing musical activities at home?
It's that stigma, isn't it, that music, you have to be trained to do music. And it goes back to the idea that music doesn't necessarily have to be a polished piece of music. It can just be a sound, or creating sounds together. That's still music. So I think that's one thing that, so it's that stigma with the word music, and people are scared. People say, oh, I'm not musical, I can't do that. And it's like, yes, anyone can do it. Anyone can make a sound. And I think it's encouraging and giving people that confidence to know that they can do it. And even if they're just doing simple things, that's better than doing none at all. And also the time commitment, I think. Obviously, families with people with special needs, they've got so much on their plate already. They've got so many things to think about. They've got, medical needs and extra things like that. And it might not be top priority in their time with what they've got. Yes, I think that possibly puts them off. And I think there should be more emphasis on on sort of smaller ideas. So not saying that music has to be a whole session, but saying you can do 5 minutes of this, or you could do 5 minutes of this.
So do you have any suggestions of how parents can introduce musical activities into their home, even if they have very little musical experience?
Yes. I think that there are more resources out there than people think. There are charities, I don't know if I'm allowed to plug this like this, but there are charities such as Soundabout and the Amber Trust as well is another great one, that create resources for people to use. And there's sort of sets of cards and things that have got musical activities on. And yeah, and getting parents to think maybe there should be more sort of community music sessions that sort of educating parents rather than just doing the music. I think that would really help. Also using existing pieces of music such as really simple tunes like nursery rhymes, and things like that, and changing it so that you might use an existing nursery rhyme, but you might make up your own words, and then that could incorporate part of the day. So, for example, a routine. So people might struggle getting up in the morning, so you could change a song and change the words of it to "Let's get up" or "Let's brush our teeth" or whatever. And that's using a pre-existing thing and just changing it slightly, which people can change to suit whoever they're with and their child. What else? I think the big first step is to buy musical instruments or make some musical instruments. You can make percussion instruments out of you can make drums out of Tupperware boxes or cardboard boxes or whatever. Get some elastic bands, and yeah, creating the resources is the first big step, I think. You can also use music as a tool to, as we talked about earlier, about emotions. So you could listen to a calming piece of music and that could calm your child down. Or if you want them to get up and be excited about something, you could use an exciting piece of music. So you can use music in lots of different ways.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think what you were saying about incorporating it into a routine, like music doesn't have to be music on its own, like it can be sort of brought into everyday life in ways that isn't like an educational setting almost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess you touched on this a little bit earlier, but in your opinion, what is the definition of music?
I think that a lot of people feel that music has to be, as I said earlier, polished piece of music, but it really doesn't. A music could be sort of your child or whoever you're with making a small vocal sound and you copying their vocal sound. That is that interaction, that creating of sound. So I think as long as it's got interaction and creating of some sound, that still classes as music. Yeah, for example, a piece of music that was written in the 1600s is very, very different to Ed Sheeran, for example. Like, there is such a huge range of music, and that's why I think it can be interpreted in so many different ways. So it's quite hard to put a definition of music, but I think it's broader than people realise.
And do you think our definition of music can affect how we view a child's own music making?
Yes, because it's going back to that thing, isn't it? That they could tap on the drum really quietly. They could make a really small vocal sound. They could shake a shaker. They could sing along to a song, whatever it may be. That is their own personal way of making music, and it may be different. So you, as a pet or someone as a parent, might try and interact with their child. And it may be very different to if you take them along to a music session, for example, and them interacting within that setting. Yeah, and everyone has their own definition of music. And I think it's celebrating those small little moments as well as the big concerts or whatever you may see. Yeah, and their way of making sound and communicating is definitely still music.
Well, we've come to our final question. So I just wanted to know, do you think that there is a benefit to child-led music sessions over pre-planned sessions, and why or why not?
Yes, I think there's definitely a benefit to child-led music. I think it's important to have pre-planned sessions for the sort of structure of it. So when I do my sessions, I believe that you should have a hello song that stays consistent if you can, and maybe a warm-up of some kind, and then a goodbye song or a closing song, because I think having that structure really, really helps people with special needs to understand there's a start and there's a finish and there's something's going to happen in the middle. But also the activities within the session can be very child-led, absolutely. So I use a lot of intensive interaction, which is bouncing off their ideas. So if I was working with a child one-to-one, I might say to them, can you make a sound? And they'll make a sound, and then I will copy their sound, and that gives them the chance to recognise that they're being noticed, they're being part of this activity. And then maybe then we turn that into something else. There might be other people in the session and I get everyone to make their sound, and that's the sort of ownership of their sound and their belonging within the session. And then it also makes it more personal as well. So I think if they, even though they might not be able to communicate, if they can feel like, oh, I sort of added something to that session, that was my sound, that was my idea, and that's so important and really special, I think. Equally, when you plan sessions, there are so many of my sessions that haven't gone to plan, where I've sort of thought, I'm going to do this, and then nothing goes out the window, nothing happens like that, and it all goes out the window because either an activity doesn't work or they love it, and you have to just, if they love it, you keep doing it. And repetition is key as well. Yeah, so I think the child-led music is really, really important, to give them a sense of belonging and ownership of their ideas and sounds.